That would be helpful. There you go. You are all on notice. We are recording. All right. So again, it's great to see everyone here. I appreciate people showing up, and folks we haven't met yet. Thank you for joining us. I see people are still streaming in into this meeting. It is wonderful to see so many faces, and I am very excited for the speakers and what they have to share with you today. What we usually try to do is to add our information into the chat. So if you would like, no obligation, but your name, your any sort of affiliation and contact information, if you would like. And the other thing that I would ask is if you do share and raise your hand and contribute, you just tell us your name and anything else. If you want to tell us your affiliation, that would be great, because there are so many people on here, and I'm sure not everyone knows one another. And that was a great suggestion that was made by our friend Steve Seckler, who I see here. Hi, Steve. Thank you for that that great suggestion a while back. So thank you all again for being here. So this is our Legal Wellbeing Network meeting. I am Heidi Alexander. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the director of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. I know many of you, not all of you. Hello. We have been meeting with this group every other month for about 2 years now, and it draws a diverse group of people all committed to improving well-being in the profession. And I'm so happy to see that this group just continues to grow, which I hope is demonstrative of all the work that we are doing, all the work that you are all doing, and the awareness that that we are continuing to create around issues of well-being in the law. We try to bring presenters in that can share information that will be helpful to you, to your workplaces, and to your efforts towards well-being, whether that's organizationally or individually or both. We're also working to create a repository of resources from all of these meetings. So we do record, like I said, all of the meetings, and we post the materials on our website. Last month, we had Mala Rafiq, who is a member of the SJC Standing Committee and also a managing partner at Rosenfeld and Rafiq, and she spoke about how she creates a culture of well-being at her small firm. And we also had Shira Diner, who's the Director of Associate Development and Recruitment at Todd & Weld, mid-sized firm here in Boston, speak on how she's working to incorporate well-being related programs and initiatives as part of her work at Todd & Weld. And we also had Anne Bradford, who many of you know, who was one of the co-authors of the seminal National Task Force report on lawyer well-being and is currently the Vice President of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law. And she talked about the first conference of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, which happened just recently, and hopefully some of you were able to take part of that. So again, Gavin has put in the link to our website with all the recordings and information from past meetings. So before we launch into hearing from these two fabulous speakers that we have lined up for today, I just want to share a couple of updates. So for those of you who practice in Massachusetts, we hope that you have completed the well-being survey that was launched by Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers a couple of weeks ago through an independent research organization. Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers actually has this up on their webpage, and I'm just gonna put that into the chat right here. So if you haven't had a chance to take it, please do. And we also encourage you to please share it with your communities as well. I also wanted to mention that that LCL recently put on a great webinar from one of their clinicians on tips to prevent and recover from burnout with Sean Healy, and I'll also put that into this chat. That was recorded, so certainly very timely. and obviously always a great program with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, and especially for those of you folks who know Sean Healy, who is fantastic. I want to remind everyone that we are approaching Wellbeing Week in the Law, which is May 2nd through 5th. And so you'll hear more from us and the Institute for Wellbeing in Law with all the different resources and plans that we have in store. If you are interested in helping us to plan some of those events, local events, please feel free to let me know. I would be happy to have your input and your help. So just a reminder that that's coming up. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we are starting to recruit for our statewide mentorship program, and I'm going to put that in the chat as well. That's going to start again in April, and we had a great program last year, which was available to any new lawyer. And this year we're actually opening up that program to any lawyers. So in order to be a mentor, we ask that you have 10 years or more of practice experience. But for mentees, you can be anyone. You don't need to only be a new lawyer. So anyone is welcome to participate in that program. We hope you will share that program. For those of you who have 10 years of experience, we encourage you to join that program as a mentor, and hope that you can impart some of your knowledge and expertise to other lawyers. So let's get into the substance of our meeting here. Today, we're going to hear from two folks here in Massachusetts. So the first we're going to hear from is Professor Shalini George. Professor George teaches legal writing at Suffolk University School of Law, and her scholarship focuses on the areas of lawyer well-being, mindfulness, and cognitive science of learning. And she's the author of the recently released Law Students Guide to Doing Well and Being Well. She's also the co-author of Mindful Lawyering, and a number of different law review articles on distraction and cognitive science learning and why law students need mindfulness training. She's also the co-chair of the Diversity Committee of the Legal Writing Institute, and among many other affiliations. So first we're going to hear from Professor George, and then we're also going to hear from Amanda Rowan. Amanda is the assistant clerk in the Superior Court, both in the civil and criminal divisions. Amanda started her career as an assistant district attorney, working in the district, juvenile, and superior courts, and then began at the Massachusetts Trial Court in 2014. If you know Amanda, you will know how passionate she is about well-being in the profession. It is tangible, and you will see that when you hear Amanda speak. She's been involved with the Massachusetts Bar Association Wellbeing Committee and contributed to many programs aimed to reduce stigma to encourage attorneys to get help when they need it. So I'm pleased to have her here as well. After each speaker, we will definitely reserve time for questions and answers and discussion. And then, like I said, towards the end of the meeting, and you can sort of start to think about this, I am hoping we can do some breakout groups for networking purposes. And I have a few different topics, and each of our speakers will facilitate those topics. So one will be on mindful lawyering with Professor George, and then one will be with Amanda, efforts to reduce stigma. And then we'll have a third that's going to be specific to idea and resource sharing among private employers. And that's going to be with Catherine Adamenko, who's the manager of well-being at Ropes and Gray. So we hope that you'll stick around for that if you are able to. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Professor George to get us started.
Thank you. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Do I sound okay? I just want to make sure my microphone's okay. Great. So I'm going to share my screen with you and talk you through a little bit of what I do. I'm super excited to be here. A topic that I'm very passionate about, as I know all of you. That's why we're all here together today. So helping students do well and be well. Obviously, I'm a law professor, so I may frame things in terms of of helping students. But let's be honest, we all need this help. Students, new lawyers, more seasoned lawyers, all of us. So what I thought I would do is just talk to you a little bit about my evolution in my work and getting to where I am with my well-being work now. And I also thought that I would share with you some of the things that I do with students that, not just students, but when I talk to students or outside organizations or lawyers, some of the exercises and information that I try to pass along. So I thought I first tell you, I didn't realize that Heidi was going to give me such a nice introduction. So this slide can go a little bit faster than I had been planning. But I started thinking about topics of mindfulness and well-being actually almost 10 years ago, maybe a little bit over 10 years ago, when I started to recognize in my students. So I've been teaching at Suffolk University Law School since 2004. So 10 years into teaching, I realized that my students seemed particularly distracted, and that's when phones and laptops and all of these things were coming into the classroom more and more. And so I chose to do some research and try to figure out whether I was just being grumpy or whether there really was an effect of all of this distraction on learning. So I wrote a law review article. Once I identified a problem with distraction, I realized that mindfulness was the antidote to distraction. And so I wrote the second law review article about why I thought law schools really should be in the business of teaching mindfulness. I co-authored a book called Mindful Lawyering with two of my colleagues, and I had 2 chapters in there about mindfulness. And then I decided I needed to really broaden my view. And that's when I wrote the book that we are going to be talking about a little bit today. While it's called The Law Student's Guide to Doing Well and Being Well, it is frankly anyone's guide to doing well and being well. I talk about developing focus and concentration, how we can do well, but also an essential part of that, dealing with stress, building resiliency, diet, exercise, and nutrition. And I try to look at it very holistically. As an aside, I wrote this book while I was on a sabbatical, and that happened to coincide with my mother being diagnosed with lung cancer and passing away, my divorce. I got hit by a car while I was riding a bike, the pandemic, sending my youngest child off to college, literally all at the same time. And I put a lot of my angst into working on this book, and it actually turned out to be, I think, a great benefit to me and hopefully those who read it. Moving on from there, I'm highly involved in the AALS Balance and Wellbeing and Legal Education section. I was fortunate to receive an award this year from that section. I'm on the executive committee. I'm on the Institute for Wellbeing and Law, a member of the scholarship committee. I am the co-chair of Suffolk's Wellbeing and Professionalism Committee, along with Lyle Baker, who I think is here today. And Lyle and I are teaching a pilot course at Suffolk called Preparing for Professional Success. So I've been thinking about these issues for a long time, and I'm so thrilled to be here with everybody today who's also really thinking over these issues. So this slide is nothing new, I believe, to anyone here, but it is something that is new to most law students. So when I talked to young law students or young lawyers, I like to show them this graphic and say, look, well-being is so important that the ABA is actually telling us to consider it. And that makes us stop and realize, okay, if the ABA tells us we should be thinking about these things, we probably should be thinking about them. And I have a little conversation with students about these different aspects of well-being. Of course, the one that they're most interested in is intellectual well-being, and we can understand that. So I try to have a conversation about how what we offer our clients is literally, this. So thinking, arguing, being persuasive, being creative, all of those things are things that we want to do as lawyers. We don't often think about how we can do them best, though. We just think that it's going to happen because maybe we're smart and we've done well before. But so I like to get students or young lawyers thinking about how they can maximize their intellectual well-being, because it's easy for them to understand, in the first instance, we're worried about doing well, right? I got to get through these exams, or I need to file a brief, or, somebody's waiting for something for me that I need to perform well on. And so it's easy for me to get get people's attention with this idea of thinking about intellectual well-being. But physical well-being is as essential. So I like to bring these two in together because we're not used to, most of us, thinking about how we can improve our brain's performance simply by focusing on how our body is performing as well. I mean, they are absolutely intertwined at such a deep level. And yet law school and the practice of law can be so sedentary, and we don't allow ourselves to use these other ways of improving our well-being. So we can talk about what intellectual well-being or cognitive wellness is when I show this to people: paying attention, processing information quickly, remembering and recalling information, responding to information quickly, thinking critically. You go, yeah, I should probably be good at these things, right? As a law student or as a lawyer. What we want to do when we are helping clients, writing a brief, coming up with a new argument, arguing in front of a judge, is to be in this state of mind of flow, where you are fully immersed in an activity, not thinking about the 20 other things kicking around in your brain, or the other assignments or people who need things from you. And I think this is how we live a lot, and this is how law students operate, and this is how lawyers operate, with so many things on our mind that we don't often give 100% of our brain's resources or attention to the issue at hand. So if the goal is flow, the goal is productivity. Productivity is something that actually does make us happier, instead of worrying about things that we need to do. How do we get there? So some things that I talk about that I would call barriers to cognitive wellness: cognitive overload, which simply means trying to do too many things at any one time, trying to have too many assignments, too many problems. It's the reason why deciding that you're going to bang out a brief, 12 hours before it's due, or study all night for an exam, is never going to get you to the place where you need to be, because our brains just shut down. We each have a limited amount of cognitive capacity available to us in any given day, and we reach a point of diminishing returns. So cognitive overload is very, very bad for our cognitive wellness. Something that I've started to call distraction addiction, which is our great inability to tear ourselves away from the many distractions that life gives us. And I'm going to talk about distraction addiction a little bit more in a minute. And then stress. We're used to thinking about stress as being bad for our body, and not really understanding that stress actually causes a negative loop of behaviors, both mental and physical. So we get stressed, we don't sleep as well, we make poor choices about what we're going to eat. The stress releases chemicals in our brain that cause us to make more bad decisions, to lose our memory a little bit, to not make good decisions, which causes more stress, and so on and so on and so on. So stopping that negative loop of stress behaviors is very important for cognitive wellness as well. So I promised I would tell you a little bit more about distraction addiction. It happens to be one of my favorite topics, if you hadn't gathered from my research. So if we know we want to not be distracted, can't we tell ourselves, just focus, right? It seems so simple, and it's exactly the opposite. Our brains crave novelty. It dates back to sort of cave person days, where we had to respond to stresses and dangers in our environment. That ignites the back part of our brain, and that back part of our brain these days is ignited by text messages and emails and the ding of a computer, or the ping from a supervisor. And it works at odds with the part of our brain that we need to perform well cognitively, which is our prefrontal cortex, right? The thinking person. That work happens right here in our foreheads. They work in opposition to each other. So you would think, can't you just tell yourself, well, now I'm going to focus? Well, it doesn't happen, because when you sit down to really do a big assignment, your brain will keep craving the novelty that you're always giving it. So we see this all the time. I see it. I'm driving and I see people looking at their phones, waiting for a cup of coffee. looking at your phone. I see my students waiting for class to start looking at their phones. We never allow our brains to just be in the moment, feeling the sun on our faces, feeling your dog as you're petting your dog. I mean, we jump to so many other things. And so our brains aren't used to doing that. So this is how we're operating all the time with all of these things going on in our brains. And so we're not able to give our razor sharp focus to the work that we need to do. It also leads to more stress, and it leads to that cognitive overload. And, you know, here's my favorite comic about phones. For some reason, when we have that device in our hands, we just think we have to respond to things immediately. And this is a cycle that I'm really encouraging us to try to break. And even if you put your phone away for 20 minutes right now while we're talking, that I think would probably give you a better ability to connect with the material and to think about your own well-being just for a few minutes. So in addition then to cognitive wellness, I think a big part of this is physical wellness. So you mind your body by minding your mind. They both go together. So exercise, sleep, and nutrition are topics that I actually have started to cover, not only in my legal writing class, but in the pilot course, which we're offering at Suffolk, and in talks that I give, because we are able to unlock thoughts, creativity, ideas by getting up and moving. It's the antithesis of what first-year law students, all my first-year students will tell me, I have to stay in the library until midnight because I have this big assignment. And I keep trying to help them understand that they can actually do something better for themselves by taking a 20-minute break, getting up to move around, giving their brain the energy and the oxygen to re-engage. Equally important is sleep and what we're feeding our bodies. So those are topics that I've started to wrap in with topics of developing focus and concentration. I like to show this slide. So sometimes I might start a class, if it's a Zoom class. I've started a class with, so students come in and they see this slide and they can just look at that while they're waiting for me to start class. Sometimes I have students actually walk around in the classroom for 5 minutes before we start, and then I show them a slide like this. But just to really get the information across in a different way, that we can do better, we can perform better, we can actually pay attention better if we incorporate movement into our day. It's not something that we're used to thinking about, I think, as lawyers or law students, but it is something that is very helpful. So how do we do all of these things, right? Oh, Professor George is telling me that I don't just have to think about doing my work. I have to think about what I'm eating, and I have to think about how I'm sleeping, and I have to think about all of these things. And that's where mindfulness really comes into play. So when I talk about mindfulness, I'm not talking about any religious or mystical or spiritual form of mindfulness. Because of my background and the research and my focus on dealing with distraction, when I say mindfulness and when I work on mindfulness with students or young lawyers, I'm just talking about being conscious and intentional about what we do with our time and our focus. So if you have an assignment or you have a task, be in the moment with that task. Don't be worrying about the next thing that's going to happen or the thing that you've just done that you're worried about whether it's good enough, or breaking your focus on your thing to attend to emails that could probably wait, things like that. So how do we actually do this? In workshop sessions that I do, it's going to seem very, very obvious. I would like to admit that, but at the same time, we don't often put ourselves in the situation to really engage our prefrontal cortex and do work in this focused and productive manner. So in my legal writing class, or in retreats that I hold at Suffolk, or in sessions that I do that I've done with organizations, I have people bring in something that they need to work on, something that they really have to finish, and it needs to be a specific something. So for my legal writing students right now, they're working on a memo. So I tell them it's not just bring a memo, it's have a specific task in mind. For students, I might say, don't just say, I'm going to do my contracts now, but think like, what actually do you need to do? Read 3 cases, brief them, and think about how that material relates to what you've learned before. So the first part of this focused work technique is that you must have an intention or a goal for what it is you're going to do. Just having an intention or a goal makes it that much more likely that you will actually accomplish it, rather than just, I'm going to work, or I'm going to work on this brief, and you can't marshal your resources. Then I have people clear away everything else that might interfere with their focus. And it's amazing in the classroom when we do this, or in workshop session, where I say phones have to be away, not just even on the desk face down, but they have to be put away where you can't see them, because research does show that your phone will keep going there. Even if it's face down and turned off, you're going to keep thinking, well, I'm not looking at it. And so that second that you're not looking at it is the second you're not engaged with your work. So we clear off anything that can interfere with focus. And in a room, it might be that you just have a book and a brief and a piece of paper. Everything else goes away. Nothing else that can physically catch your attention. If you're working at home, don't have a stack of bills next to you, or don't have the next assignment that you need to work on, because your mind will keep going there. So we just create the physical condition in order to be able to focus on it. Then I do 3 to 5 minutes of breathing, meditative breathing, so that we calm our parasympathetic nervous system. And as we're doing the breathing, I will tell people to, if the thoughts drift into your mind, like I need to pick up a gallon of milk on the way home, or it's my brother-in-law's birthday, and it is my brother-in-law's birthday today, so that is kicking around in my mind. You can jot that down when the breathing part is over, and then you can put that away. You won't forget it, and you can attend to it when the session is over. And then for some amount of time, then we work in silence. People can have earphones if they want to. Some people find it helpful to listen to music. Some people just like quiet, whatever works for you. But the point is, no getting up, no talking, no looking at your phone, no checking email, nothing. So I'm going to do one of these this Thursday at Suffolk from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Students will come in with whatever they need to work on. At 50 minutes, we take a break, because research shows 50 minutes is about how long your brain can really focus on a task before it starts wandering. We take an intentional 5 to 8 minute break. We breathe for 2 minutes again, and then we continue. And the students are just begging. They're like, they want to do this every week. And I have to remind them that they can do this on their own. They don't need me to do it for them. And yet I do at least one a semester. I'm going to try and do a little bit more, but it is amazing then to have just a moment of self-reflection at the end. What did we accomplish? How much were we able to accomplish? Why were we able to accomplish this? So that has been an interesting way for me to connect the material. So it's one thing to tell people you can focus, you can work on focus. It's another thing to actually create the conditions where that focus happens. So other things that I just try to talk about, and I do have an eye on the time, Heidi, I'm going to make sure I keep to my 20 minutes. Making sure that we take schedules and breaks. We are not computers. If we were, then we could just say, okay, I will work for 12 hours, and you would do 12 hours of work, but the brain doesn't work that way. Zoom fatigue is real. So getting up, stretching, taking your eyes off your computer, things like that. Avoiding the warrior mentality of I'll just keep working because that's what I'm supposed to do. And this phrase "shut down complete" comes from Cal Newport. If anybody is a fan of Cal Newport's, this idea that we need to allow ourselves to just turn off from work at some point. And if we don't, then we never allow our brains and our bodies to rest. so that they can be productive the next day. So if you are falling asleep with your phone or your laptop literally in your bed, you are never going to give your unconscious brain a chance to help you solve problems. You're not going to allow time for rest and relaxation or the activities that make you a whole person. I think that's why we become one-dimensional when we are constantly tied to our email and things like that. So finally, I just wanted to touch on this pilot course that we're offering at Suffolk. So, and I'm sure many of you are aware that the ABA is now telling us officially, which is wonderful, that we should be instructing students on well-being, and that this is a necessary part of developing a professional identity. So our course that we're trying this year is a year-long 1-credit course. It's pass or no pass. Notice I didn't say pass or fail. That's my new thing now. It meets once every 3 weeks, so that we're trying to meet with students over the course of the whole year, the whole first year, to be able to process with them things that happened during the first year. Topics include all of these. My focus is with students is to learn to just sort of keep calm and manage the expectations and the obligations of the first year in a way that will allow students to start to develop the skills that will allow them to maintain themselves in the practice of law. So when I started off with that ABA task force well-being slide, when I show that to students, I usually say, I know none of you have come to law school hoping that you will one day burn out. No one wants that, and yet that's what happens. So I look at this course and some of the other things that we're doing as a way to start building those healthy habits from the very start. Motivation gets you started, habit keeps you going is what I try to work on. This idea that it takes a lot of willpower to start some of these things, and because we have only a certain amount of brain power, it's under times of stress, you're not suddenly going to start an exercise routine or start scheduling your time. But the habits that you can form in these early days are habits that one falls back on. And when I was writing my book, I told you I had a rather difficult time. I realized, personally, I realized that part of what enabled me to get through some of the things that I've gone through in the last few years are just falling back on some of those healthy habits. So I'm just about, I think, out of time, but I definitely welcome comments or questions. I'm really excited about what we're doing at Suffolk. We're trying to build on that pilot course. I think Lyle is here as well, so I'm happy to answer any questions now or later. But thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for asking me to be here today.
Thank you.
I'm here, and I just want to say, yes, Lyle, please go ahead.
No, I just want to say, colleague in this.
Thank you, Lyle. I do see some familiar faces. It's nice to see.
Well, thank you so much for that. I love that idea of the focus time with the students, and it's interesting how they've responded to that and want more. I think that says something. And a huge shout out to both you and to Professor Baker for your efforts in bringing that material to the 1Ls. I mean, we can only hope that it is successful and then expanded upon and hopefully required in all 1L courses, 1L curriculum. And I also just wanted to mention, since we were talking about mindfulness, the Mindfulness and Law Society, which hopefully folks know about, but we'll put that in the chat. They have great meetings and resources and meditation offerings. So I see Steve has his hand up here, and then anyone else who would like to chime in, feel free to raise your hand, which would probably be the easiest since we have a large group here. So Steve, please feel free.
Steve, are you muted?
Oh, Steve, you're muted.
Great presentation, Shalini.
Hi, Steve. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you again. Great presentation. I'm curious what kind of feedback you're getting from the students about how to sort of rejigger your course. And
yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Good question. So we had our Center for Teaching and Scholarly Excellence come in and talk to our students at the end of the semester, last semester. I got incredibly positive feedback from my students. I wish I had it in front of me and I would read you some of the comments, but the gist of it was that they feel like people in the class, not just law students. They appreciate, I see the class as an opportunity to talk about all of the things that somehow don't have a home in the first year. And so we've done a focused work session, but we've also done things like I did practice networking with them in my last class. So it's a small class and it allows me to respond directly to what they seem to be enjoying as well. But their overall comments were that they thought everyone should have to take it. They appreciated the small classroom. We also did something with scheduling so that they got out of their usual first year sections and there was some cross-pollination that was able to happen. So they appreciated that. They appreciated that somebody is talking to them about well-being because they are very stressed. They are very, very stressed.
I should add, we had Justice Botsford come as co-chair of the committee, the SJC, talk to the students early in the course, which they very much appreciated.
All right, thank you, Steve. I see Robert's hand up. Robert.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Clayman. I'm the executive director of the Mass Judges Conference, and I've been working with judges for some time. And my question has to do more with sort of organizational culture, starting with law training, perhaps pre-law, but in the law school itself, and I'm sure that Amanda, who is with the Superior Court, especially during COVID, post-COVID, wherever we're headed, does the legal culture lend itself, at least in today's world, to provide people with the space, the room from their supervisors, from the chief justices, from the clerk magistrates to the judges, because there's enormous pressure to get things done quickly and transactionally. So what's happening in the law schools that allows this to happen? Because I think it's some things that you're doing really tell me something, but I'd love to see it sort of get to the level of folks in the courthouses because there are 6,000 of them.
So that's a great question. And I will say that law schools are not like, it's not every law school that's jumping up and down to do this. And even at Suffolk, we are constantly having to convince some of our colleagues that this is something that we should be doing. I think students are starting to drive some of it. They've had such a positive response that I think that drives a little bit of it. But I share your question. So when Judge Botsford came and spoke to our classes, she was telling the students that she thought they would be the change makers, that they would demand something different. The question I asked her is the question you're asking today. I said, what change do you see? Because I think until there's change from the top down, it's a little bit of, it's lip service in organizations. And she said she does not see enough change from the top. And that is really where she's hoping that we can keep kind of this word going. I think the new ABA regulation will help. I do think that will make a difference.
If I can add a piece of history to this, and it's not, it is precedent in a way, but Chief Justice Samuel Zoll, who led the district court for a number of years, was a partner with Herbert Benson, who just passed away. And he actually started back in the 70s and 80s doing a lot of work around mindfulness and meditation, and used literature as a source of talking about the stressors on folks, on judges especially, and had some very good facilitators in those groups. So we do have some history, but it does have shorter life than we would want, because to make it part of our culture just takes a long-term commitment. And if somebody, he used to say to us in his office, "I'm closing my door now. I don't want to take any calls." And he would meditate. And this is when people were protesting at his house around domestic violence cases, a whole range of things happening in the district court. So my hope would be that we could, through Judge Botsford, through Chief Justice Budd, and a very young bench, begin to see this trickle down, actually percolate up, if you will, from what you're doing and what the law students are doing. But it's something that takes a lot of work. So well done.
Thank
A lot
you.
of good things happening.
And I co-teach with Shalini, and I have a meditation component as well for the students so that they get used to this idea.
I see,
Debbie? Yeah.
yeah, I see another hand. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you if you are focusing in as part of your program on ADR at all, where you teach the students instead of we have to litigate, we have to fight for contracts or whatever type of law we're doing, versus there's different ways to try to resolve conflict, such as using mediation, collaborative law, and the like in your program.
It's not something that I'm directly involved in, but I should have also mentioned that we, in addition to this pilot course, we've added a credit to professional responsibility, specifically to address, to allow time for instruction on well-being principles. So ADR wise, it is a perfect place certainly for it. And part of what Lyle and I are doing with our well-being and professionalism committee is thinking about where else in the law school we can have sort of this more continuous instruction. So that would make a lot of sense. Well,
So
thank
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say, any final
Yeah.
comment, any final, one last comment or question, and then we'll move.
I'll just add one quick one. I've taught the negotiation course, and I think that the kinds of human interactions that good negotiators have are part of the building blocks that we are trying to work on here. So attention, intention, those kinds of issues that Professor George has talked about.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So I do want to move on to Amanda in the interest of time, so that we might have the chance to move into breakout rooms. You never know with the timing here, and I know everyone's schedules are tight. So Amanda, I'm going to turn things over to you since I already did the introduction, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. I just want to make sure that you can hear me and everything's working because you never know. Thank you very much. We did a jury trial this morning, and for the first time in a long time, the recording system just decided not to work. So that was fun. I am so psyched to be here. I'm so happy that Heidi, you asked me to do this. There are so many familiar faces in the room, which I love because I know that we are all a committed and passionate group of humans who really, really want to make change in this area. I just started to give you a brief introduction to me. I went to Suffolk Law School. I am psyched to hear what Professors George and Lyle Baker are doing. I would have loved to have had that stuff. And I do think we need to start on day one. I went at night and then became an assistant DA, and I was there for 13 years in total because I was a victim witness advocate before that. And then I became a clerk here in 2014. And I am currently in the brand new gorgeous building in Lowell. For any of you who have not had the opportunity to be here yet, you will love it. Essentially, the way that I ended up in this space in the legal world is I was doing a jury trial. I was clerking in a jury trial. And as many of you know, Marianne LeBlanc was trying a case in front of me. And somehow we ended up talking, and it was very clear to me that she really cared about lawyer well-being and this stuff. And through our conversation, I ended up for the first time really in my career opening up to her and telling her that I was a person in long-term recovery from alcoholism. And really that conversation has turned into what has become really my passion, and sort of ever since she asked me if I wanted to start working in it, I have not shut up since. She asked me to be a member of the Mass Bar Association Lawyers Wellbeing Committee, which several of the people on this call are, and they're an awesome group of people that I'm super psyched to be part of. We're doing a lot of really good work, if I'm allowed to say that. And I'm really excited because myself, along with Sean Healy, are on the specific objective of reducing stigma for help-seeking behavior. And it's so specifically targeted to what I care about and what I do and who I am. And it has been such a gift. Essentially being part of that committee has allowed me to take some ideas that I've had and put them into action. So just to give you a sense of what we have been doing, or what I've been working on as part of a member of that committee, was our first big idea, which I wasn't sure how anyone was going to respond to this, was last Wellbeing Week. We put on, with some people on this call, a program that was essentially a panel of lawyers in recovery. And it was, lawyers were invited, judges were invited, and you could come and you could see us and meet us and hear us and ask questions of us. And the idea being that the only way that we are going to change the stigma on this issue is if we talk about it, period. If we identify and if we talk about it. That is my strongly held belief. There is no other way to do this. It might be hard. It might be, it takes some courage sometimes, but it's what we just have to do. And some people aren't comfortable with that, and that is totally cool. But I've been really lucky where now that I'm no longer like litigating and I don't have a team or a side anymore, I don't have a lot of the fears that I had. So when I was a DA and I got sober then, I was actually, I think I was a DA in Superior Court when I ended up getting sober. My biggest fear was somebody would find out and then they would somehow use it against me. It's a totally unreasonable fear, but that doesn't mean I didn't have it. So that is why, for me, now that I'm a clerk and I don't really have a dog in the fight, I don't have an adversary anymore. It gave me the courage to be able to speak out. And I know that there are a lot of people who are not in my position who still have those fears. So I sort of do it because I know that there are other people who can't. So essentially, we were able to put on that program. It was awesome. It was really well received. I was like so proud of that night. And it's really kept going ever since. And the committee has been so great because every idea that we come up with, it's just been embraced. So Sean and I right now are working on, actually yesterday, my article ran in Lawyers Weekly. We have started a series and I'm just collecting articles from people who are willing to speak out about issues that have previously been stigmatized. So I know that there are some people on this call who have already put together articles for me, and I am so grateful. And those are going to continue to run, and it's going to be called the Lawyer Wellbeing Series. So anybody who is willing to write an article for us that is willing to be part of this, I encourage you to please send it along. I know that these are going to be well received. I just know it. And a lot of people ask me, what was it that made you decide to go public? And I told you it was because I don't have an adversary, but the other reason is because I did it really, really slowly. I did it, my husband obviously knew, but like even friends, I dipped my toe in very shallowly at first to see what the response was going to be. And then it grew from there, and then it came to work with me. And I can tell you that every single step along the way, I have been so supported. Everybody that I was afraid of was going to judge me or distance themselves from me or not want maybe to be involved with me has done the opposite. It has not only provided a ton of support for me so that I can tell other people, it's not what you think it is. It's not like you think it is. People are so loving and so supportive, and they love to hear this stuff. But also, I think that it lets people ask questions. So I think it's one of those topics that, at least in my experience, nobody ever brought up. And if we did, it was always almost for drinking. Like it was always pro drinking. It was always like, have a glass of wine, have a bottle of wine. Let's go for drinks. Like everything that we talked about had alcohol somehow involved in it, and almost in a positive light. And it was very rare that we talked about it in a negative. And part of what I found was so ironic about that was I'm working in the courts, I'm working in the DA's office. Half of what we see is substance abuse, if not more. And yet no one's talking about the fact that like, this is a problem for a lot of people. And that was why when I found the SJC report and the ABA, the Joint Task Force report, I was like, it was unbelievable. I felt like people were finally speaking my language. Like these people did the work and they talked to the people and they got their finger exactly on the issue here. And now the issue is we just have to keep the ball rolling forward. Like this is our moment. We have to keep going. We can't stop. And it will grow momentum because once I knew someone who was, we call it recovering out loud, and I saw that they were okay, then I could do it. Then other people, you know, we look at each other, we watch each other, we see the response of other people. I can tell you that when I first got sober, this is my nightmare. This would actually be a portrait of my nightmare, what's happening right now. People I don't know in the legal community hearing me talk about my drinking problem was like death, like I would just die. And now I do it and I do it by choice. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that I'm given to do this. It's incredible. And so I sort of think of it as an homage to almost 10 years ago myself, that maybe if it had been a little bit better then, and we had been talking about this a little bit more, and the entire culture wasn't work hard, play hard, which now makes me want to die. And I used to say it all the time. Maybe it would have been different for me, but for a lot of other people. I'm very, very lucky to be sober. Every morning and every night, I am thanking whatever you believe is out there that I am sober. And so I hope that this movement, I hope that people talking about it, and also just as importantly, people receiving it as well as it's been received continues. Because if I hadn't been received, well, I wouldn't have continued doing this. I would have gone back into, I called it living a double life. We'd come into work and people would be like, what'd you do last night? And I'd be like, nothing. And meanwhile, of course, I went to a meeting or I went out with friends. And it's been nice to now whittle it down to one life. I only have one life. It's also afforded me the opportunity to be authentic. And being my authentic self is the best thing in the world. I have found that it makes my relationships with other people a hell of a lot stronger. When you don't feel like you have a secret back here, you're able to truly and really connect with people. My relationships are so much stronger. And that has been a gift of me getting sober, because I would have walked around with this secret forever. And it always would have been between me and whoever it is that I was dealing with. So that's why I'm so grateful for situations like this. I'm grateful that they let me do that article for Lawyers Weekly. I'm grateful that we were able to put on our panel conversation last May. I know we're going to make more things happen as time goes on. Bernardo and I spoke at a law firm who wanted us to come in and talk about being sober lawyers. I'm doing a recording and onboarding video with a judge in recovery, recovering out loud, for every new employee at the trial court. They're going to watch it, and we're going to identify as being people in recovery, not only for signs and symptoms, but also just to say, we're here. So whether it's maybe changing your vernacular, or maybe it's about being a little bit more sensitive, or maybe it's just not assuming that everybody you work with wants to drink all the time. So it's such a gift. I'm so happy to get to do this for work. I'm so happy that my bosses have been supportive. The people in the trial court have been supportive. I'm on a couple of other committees with the trial court, and speaking out about this issue has certainly helped me to be more comfortable speaking out and giving ideas on other issues, like the trauma response task force that I'm on. It's like, if I could tell you how much vicarious trauma played into me being an active alcoholic, it's unbelievable. I mean, I feel like I know just as much about vicarious trauma as I do about alcoholism as someone who's sober. So I know what it's like to be in the courtroom doing that battle stuff that we as lawyers do, but at the same time being told, be tough, suck it up, get over it, don't talk about it. And that combination is it's a recipe for disaster. And as we look at these reports that are coming out, and I'm super excited to see the latest report and see the survey that went out. I can't wait to hear what we get back. We lawyers need to be better in this area and do better. And, people like everybody on this call who are here because you care about this issue and are supportive and hardworking and amazing in your own rights, working together on this. My only hope is that this does not become, the fad topic. I want this to continue, because it's not just about, oh, he was drunk at work. It's not just about an OUI or what can happen to us after we get one. It's your whole person. It's everything. Alcoholism affects everybody around you. It affects you. It affects everybody that works with you. This is an everybody disease. And so that's why it's so important that we all start dealing with it, talking about it, and addressing it. So really, when people ask me, what do you think about stigma and getting rid of it? I have a couple of things that just come to mind, which I hopefully can share my screen. It's really 3 slides. And I like to keep things basic because I need things to be basic for me. So let me see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Can you guys see this?
Not yet. Yep, now we can.
Awesome.
There we
Okay.
go. Yep.
So these are a couple of the screens that we did for that MBA program that I told you guys about with the lawyers and the judge on the panel. This is how I try to keep it simple. So number 1, addiction is a disease. It's not up for debate. It's not something that we need to argue about. It just is. Everybody agrees that addiction is a disease. So if we all can just sort of keep it moving and accept that as the situation, then we look at stigma, and stigma is one of the most, if the most significant roadblock to people getting help, right? So then lastly, we have, oh good, that was my 16-minute alarm. And Heidi, feel free to tell me to shush if I need to shush sooner. Lawyers in large numbers are struggling with a disease and not getting treatment because of the stigma associated with that disease. That's the bottom line. So if you want to trade out, if you're trying to, if anyone's struggling with this, or you're trying to figure out the right way to deal with this issue, just replace the word addiction with any other disease. Cancer, diabetes, botulism, whatever. If you replace it with that word, for some reason, because of what we've all been sold for decades, it changes the meaning. And it's like, oh, well, I wouldn't feel differently if I found out that person had diabetes. I wouldn't be judgmental if I found out that she was she had breast cancer. And that's all we have to do. it's just this societal stamp that we've put on this disease in particular. It doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't mean it has to continue. And so a big fear that I had when I started speaking out is, oh, what if this is a jinx? What if I'm going to drink again? Because the thing about alcoholism is once you have it, at least my belief is, you have it forever, right? So I'm a person in recovery. It doesn't mean I'm going to be in recovery forever. Well, would I tell someone who has cancer that they should shut up because their cancer might come back one day? That's ridiculous. And if God forbid it did, what would that person need? Support? Nurturing? So if everyone can just try to change our thinking and change our language and ask questions, because God knows I love, as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. Please, please do it. This does not need to be a secret anymore. And as we've all seen from all the reports that you've all read and you don't need me to tell you about, like, we're losing people. We're losing important people. We're losing loved ones. It's a really bad disease and I hate it, but I'm okay that I have it, because if it's part of the system that's going to change everybody's opinion about it, then it's worth it. So I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions or anything
know
that you
what,
want to say.
Amanda, first, I just want to say that, we so appreciate all your contributions to the movement, and obviously your courage in sharing your own story and your lived experiences. And we're all, I'm sure, happy that you can be your authentic self, who we all love, especially and those who have not gotten to know Amanda. I hope that you all will, because she is a fantastic person. But what I want to do, just in the interest of time, because we only have 10 minutes left, and I want to see if we, for folks who are interested, might want to go into breakout groups, and folks who are interested in joining your breakout group can continue to chat with you,
Sure,
Amanda.
sure.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up these groups: Mindful Lawyering with Professor George, Reducing Stigma with Amanda, and then Private Employers and sort of a resource share among private employers with Catherine Adaminko at Ropes, who I see is here. Appears as though you're maybe in the jungle at the moment, but but thank you for being here. I'm going to open up these rooms, and this is a little bit of a test, but we'll see what happens. See how you can all give me feedback as to what you think about ending with this. But feel free to join whichever room you would like. If you have to move on to your next meeting, we understand.